Hey everyone, so this is another video on critical appreciation of the poem The Bee Meeting. This is a poem by Sylvia Plath. So the outlines we will cover today are like this: about the poetess, then critical appreciation, and at last conclusion as we always do. So first is about Sylvia Plath. So, she was born on 27th October 1932 in Boston, Massachusetts, US, and died on 11th February 1963 at the age of 30 in London, England. Her pen name was Victoria Lucas, and occupation was poet, novelist, and short story writer. Her language was English, and alma mater was Smith College, Newham College, which is situated in Cambridge. Period was 1960 to 1963, and genre was poetry, fiction, and short stories. And notable works by her are like this: the Bell Jar and Ariel, and as we are studying the Bee Meeting, and before this we have studied Lady Lizarus and Daddy, the poem Daddy also. Notable awards by her are like this: Full Bright Scholarship, Glasscock Prize, Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. So this is about her, and next we will study critical analysis of the Bee Meeting. So we will study all these 12 points one by one. First is summary or overview. The poem The Bee Meeting is basically Sylvia Plath's desperate attempt to recover her lost identity. The bee meeting described in the poem is a beekeeper's ritual. The occasion is a transfer of swarm of bees from one box, that is hive, to another. It takes place with the change of rule. The old queen is killed and succeeded by the new queen. Uh, After the death of the old queen, the old box is deserted and the swarm shifts to another box. This is summary or overview of the poem, and next is about theme. The poem represents the life of a woman in the West. The affairs, marriage, divorces, disloyalty of man lovers, and resulting frustrations uh, are reflected in the poem. The poem is of confessional type. The poet describes her own experiences and events of life that she was forbearing in her life. The bee meeting poem gives the poet's relation to her neighbors, children, husband, other women, and herself, as well as her place in the history. Next is personal conflicts. So, the bee meeting is first poem of the volume, The Ariel. Here, the speaker finds in the midst of other people like this: the rector, the midwife, the sexton, the agent for bees, the butcher, the grocer, the postman, someone I know. The poet must be feeling alone and fearful of her neighbors and the other villagers. She refers to the villagers, which all appear to be doing something specifically to the bee or to her. It may be due to her mental disorder, due to her inner and personal conflicts. She may express her fear to lose all her individuality and become common. So this is about the personal conflicts reflected in the poem The Bee Meeting. Next is about place and time. The place and time of the bee meeting suggests that the speaker is moving stage. She meets the townspeople at the bridge, which is a symbol of the place of connection between the divided locals or the site of change. The lines are like this: Who are these people at the bridge to meet me? They are the villagers. The manner in which the speaker is dressed confirms about the time of the year, which is summer, as stated: in my sleeveless summery dress. So, this is denoting the summer time. Next slide is about confusion and gloomy tone. The poem is is constructed in a gothic and gloomy tone. The confused state of mind of the poet is evident by her confused questions, her inability to recognize familiar faces, repetitions, which shows her confused state of mind. She also utilizes themes of violence and death. She discusses metaphors of violence, a mixed description of the atmosphere of both death, funeral, ritual, and ceremony. She used a feminine tone in the poem. Next is about questions and answers. So the poem opens and closes with questions and is riddled with questions throughout. Most of the stanzas include questions. Through much of the poem, the speaker tries to answer them herself, but the last line closes the poem with yet another question. Obviously, it cannot be answered in this poem. The questions are: who are these people at the bridge to meet me? Is some operation taking place? Which is the rector now? Is that man in black? What have they accomplished? And except this, there are some other questions also, like this: is it the butcher, the grocer, the postman, someone I know? What have they accomplished? Or which is the midwife? Is that her blue coat? So such confused questions reflect her inner conflict and disorientation. Her sense of alienation from her neighbors shows that she cannot tolerate them. As a poet, isolation is necessary in order to achieve their own identity. In this manner, she might explore and pursue a new direction. The questions show that she is in fear of something invisible. So, this is about questions and answers as stated in the poem The Bee Meeting. Next slide is about fear and sense of endanger. The poet feels that she is endangered by the villagers, but there is no such description of the actions of the villagers that might appear suspicious. It is that she believes her dealings with the villagers in the collective life as the disaster. Her own perceptions are exaggerated with a dangerous and frightening expression like this: strips of tin foil winking like people, feather dusters fanning their heads in a sea of bean flowers. Creamy beans, flowers with black eyes and leaves like bowed hearts. And is it blood clots? The tad drills are dragging up that string. No, no, it is scarlet flowers that will one day be edible. So the eyes of the bean flowers are black, bruised. Their leaves are like pursed hearts. Their flowers are like blood clots, and the hawthorn killing its own offspring. Such a frightening description gives a monstrous impression of humility and thus cause an effect of dehumanizing the whole environment. It is shown that the poetess contains inner fear in her mind from the surrounding world. Next slide is about understanding the situation. There is also a discussion of her desire, effort, and intention to become aware of the whole situation. She intends to understand that what she is going on around her and for what purpose. She inquires a few confusing questions. Such confusing questions, such as the psychological aspect of her mind. She is involved and observant in the outer world, but she is incapable of the unconscious feelings going in her mind and heart. Next slide is about death. The theme of death and darkness is an integral part of her poetry. She believes herself as the old queen bee who has to be either killed or expelled from the hive in which she lives. The lines showing like this: she is old, old, old. Frightened by the thought, she misinterprets the actions of the villagers of smoking the hive while there is no apparently suspicious action of the villagers. Smoke rolls and scarves in the grove. The mind of the hive thinks this is the end of everything. Rather than choosing herself to be killed by others, she opts to die herself. Her own suicidal attempts is similar to the killing of the queen bee, as she had put her head in the gas stove while the gas was on. So she expresses her exhaustion from her unsuccessful married life as she says, I'm exhausted, I am exhausted. The theme of death is fully reflected in the manner as she compares the dead body of the old queen bee to the corpse of a human. The poet turns cold as she encounters the dead body of the queen bee. Next is about imagery and technique. The poem is a very narrative in its nature. The central figure of the poem is the poetess herself. The usage of the first person image represents the poetess as a woman. The lines are also full of images and comparisons. The description of the bean flowers reflects the perfect imagery. So this is about imagery and technique, and next is about metaphor and similes. The poem is highly packed with metaphors and similes. Each line requires deep understanding at a surface level. The metaphors used include queen, virgins, etc. The queen bee is a metaphor of a woman who has developed a hatred from male dominated society. The mode of narration is based on sensitive perception of a certain situation. The poems are seen as an exploration into identity via poetical metaphor, the hive as a mind, the bees as a critical elements within society, the queen bee as a speaker, and the aspirants as common culture. So these are similes and metaphor, and at last conclusion is like this. The poem The Bee Meeting is basically the representation of the gathering at the funeral as well as a marriage procession in order to watch the killing of the old queen bee and help in the installation of the new one. The atmosphere of the poem is fearful, frightening, and its turns gloomy. Such a description shows a mental disorder of the poet due to her self created exaggeration and personal and inner conflicts. It may also reflect her hatred against the patriarchal society, but as a whole, the poem is a perfect of the reflection of the ideology and the mentality of the poet as well as her poetic capabilities. So this is all about now. Thank you for watching this video.